They say a trained canine never barks without a reason, but on a crowded morning at the station, when this German Shepherd suddenly sprinted toward a young man, everyone froze, terrified. People thought danger was coming from him, but the truth was far more heartbreaking. Because in just minutes, the secret that came to light didn't expose a criminal. It revealed something that could change a life forever. And if this retired SWAT officer hadn't trusted his partner's instincts, the ending would have been very, very different. Stay with this story. You're about to witness how one bark can rewrite fate itself. And if you love powerful canine stories like this, before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe for more. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. A cold gray morning settled over the crowded train station. Ethan Ward moved through the throng with the steady posture of a man shaped by decades of danger. At 58, his body carried the quiet strength of someone who had spent years breaking down doors and walking into gunfire, but also the gentle fatigue of a man who no longer wished to do so. His short, steel-colored hair was neatly cropped. A trimmed salt-and-pepper beard framed a jaw hardened by time. Deep lines ran from the corners of his storm-blue eyes, creases etched not by age alone, but by memories he rarely spoke of. Those eyes scanned the station with an instinctive rhythm, catching movement the way a hawk tracks wind shifts. Beside him trotted Shadow, his loyal German Shepherd, a muscular 4-year-old with a black and tan coat marked in sharp chiaroscuro. Shadow's eyes were a fierce molten gold, bright as hammered metal, revealing a mind always calculating, always sensing. He carried himself with the composed authority of a seasoned K9 who had learned the unspoken language of danger, trust, and silent promises made between dog and handler. The platform was a restless sea of people, business travelers in charcoal suits, students with backpacks slung carelessly over their shoulders, older couples wrapped in wool scarves, families dragging squeaking luggage. The tannoy crackled overhead, announcing delays and departures. Ethan had come only to escort a retired colleague's daughter to her train, but Shadow insisted on patrolling as if every trip into public space were another mission. Ethan led him. Sometimes a dog needed purpose as much as a man. He was adjusting his gloves when Shadow froze, not stiffly, but in the way a violin string tightens just before it snaps. Ethan felt the shift instantly, an invisible tug between them, a shared instinct that had saved them both more times than he'd admit to anyone alive. Shadow's nose lifted a fraction, his ears pricked forward, body leaning subtly into one direction like a compass needle dragged toward a hidden magnet. Then he barked. One sharp bark, then another, louder, desperate, the kind of bark that punched through chatter and laughter and idle movement like a bullet through glass. Conversations halted. A woman dropped her coffee. A suitcase wheel screeched against the tile. Ethan's pulse tightened, and he followed the line of Shadow's gaze. A young man stood near the vending machines, tall, mid-20s, wiry but tense, like a bowstring pulled too tight. He wore a heavy olive jacket zipped to his throat despite the mild temperature. His hair was a tousled dark brown, falling over a face too pale for someone his age. His jaw was narrow but trembling. His eyes, gray and restless, kept darting as if checking exits, calculating escape routes. Slung over his shoulder was an oversized charcoal backpack, the kind hikers used on week-long mountain treks. It sagged unnaturally, its weight shifting inconsistently, suggesting more than clothing inside. The young man flinched at Shadow's barking. His fingers, thin and shaking, clutched the strap of his backpack with such force the knuckles whitened. Ethan approached slowly, years of training slipping into place like old armor. "Sir," he called out, voice calm but edged with authority, "stay where you are." The young man swallowed hard. I don't want trouble," he stammered, voice hoarse. "Please, call off your dog." His eyes weren't angry. They were afraid. Not the fear of being caught doing wrong. Ethan knew that look all too well. But the fear of someone who carried the weight of a secret pressing against his ribs like broken glass. Shadow barked again, stepping forward. Ethan tightened the leash just enough to signal restraint, but not enough to deny the dog's instincts. Shadow wasn't aggressive. His body wasn't lowered for an attack. Instead, he was alert, tail stiff, nose twitching toward that oversized pack. Ethan's instincts hummed with the cold electricity of suspicion. For a second, the station blurred at the edges, his senses narrowing on the young man, the kind of tunnel vision that years of adrenaline conditioning taught him to trust, even cherish. Ethan raised a hand gently. "Son, what's your name?" The young man hesitated, his lips pressed into a thin, pained line. "Lucas," he whispered. He looked barely strong enough to handle the weight of the pack, let alone the fear sitting behind his eyes. Ethan softened his tone. "Lucas, Shadow's never wrong about danger, but danger doesn't always mean you're the one causing it. Sometimes he senses what's around you." Lucas's chest rose sharply, as if the words hit too close. His fingers twitched at the backpack strap, not in defiance but in anguish. I need to go," Lucas said, stepping back. "Big mistake." Shadow lunged, but not to attack. Instead, he angled his body in front of Lucas, blocking the path, barking urgently as if screaming a warning no human voice could articulate. The nearest crowd recoiled in alarm. A mother pulled her child close. Two security guards looked up from their phones, startled but unsure what to do. Lucas raised both hands instinctively, palms out. "Please," he pleaded, voice cracking, "I'm not doing anything wrong." Ethan stepped closer, reading every twitch, every shake in the young man's posture. Lucas wasn't lying, but he was hiding something, something heavy enough to bend his whole presence around it, like gravity around a star. "Lucas," Ethan said quietly, "take off the backpack." Lucas shook his head fiercely. "No, I can't." "Why?" Ethan asked softly. A war raged in the young man's eyes, terror, guilt, grief, desperation. When he finally spoke, it tore through the noise of the station like a confession shouted in a cathedral. "Because if I open it," he whispered, "they'll find me before I can run, and they'll kill her." Shadow stopped barking. He stood still, golden eyes locked onto Lucas with an intelligence that startled even Ethan. The dog stepped forward and sniffed the air near the pack, then looked back at Ethan with a soft growl, not a warning, but a plea. "Listen." Lucas pressed his trembling hand to his forehead, breath shuddering. "I didn't want to get anyone involved. I just wanted to save her." Ethan recognized that kind of torment. He'd carried a version of it himself years ago, on a night when he couldn't save someone he loved, a night that carved permanent scars into the steel of his heart. His voice softened further, dropping the command tone. "Who is her, Lucas? Who are you trying to save?" Lucas's lips parted, but no answer came. Only tears, hot, sudden, unguarded. His shoulders sagged, collapsing beneath the invisible weight he'd been carrying. The smell of sweat, fear, and grief radiated from him, so potent even Ethan felt it. Shadow whined softly, nudging the young man's knee. The dog's eyes turned gentle, almost human. Lucas looked down at Shadow as if seeing the first ally he'd encountered in months. "My mom," he finally whispered. "She's dying, and they said if I didn't do what they told me, she'd never make it through surgery." Ethan's heart clenched. The details were still a mystery, but the shape of the truth was emerging, and it was darker than the platform lights could illuminate. "Lucas," Ethan said, steady and warm, "whatever is in that pack, we can handle it. But you can't handle this alone." Lucas stared at Ethan, searching his lined face for judgment, finding none, only the battle-worn resolve of a man who had seen too much and still chose compassion over condemnation. The station noise returned in a low hum, trains arriving, wheels screeching, boots thumping. But for the three of them, Ethan, Shadow, Lucas, time seemed to shrink to the space of a single breath. And in that breath, Lucas made a choice. He loosened his grip on the pack, not surrender, just the first step toward the truth he could no longer outrun. Shadow sat beside him, tail still, eyes bright, ready. Ethan let out a quiet breath of relief. The bark had been a warning, but it was also a beginning. The air inside the station felt heavier than before, as though the noise of the crowd had dulled into a distant hum. Ethan Ward steadied his breathing while Shadow remained pressed close to Lucas, the dog's golden eyes sharp with an intelligence that unsettled the young man. The oversized backpack sat on the tiled floor between them, its fabric worn but reinforced with stitching too deliberate for casual travel. Ethan crouched beside it, his knees cracking softly, a reminder of the years spent crouched behind shields and barricades. He slid one calloused hand along the pack's seams. Lucas tensed instantly, shoulders rising as though expecting the weight of the world to come crashing down on him the moment Ethan unzipped it. Ethan glanced up at him. "Relax," he murmured. "I'm just looking." But Lucas couldn't relax. His face, a narrow face with soft bones and a jaw too sharp from stress, twitched with every move Ethan made. The color had drained from his already pale skin. Sweat glistened along his brow, gathering beneath dark strands of hair. "Please," Lucas whispered, voice barely audible. Don't let anyone else see." Ethan paused, reading the desperation hidden in those gray eyes. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't defiance. It was fear, the kind that burrows into the heart and rearranges the way a man stands, speaks, even breathes. Shadow sniffed the bag once more, then pulled back with a low, uneasy whine. Ethan recognized that sound. It wasn't the growl of aggression or alert. It was the sound Shadow made when he sensed danger that couldn't be seen or smelled, danger that lived in the spaces between truths. Ethan slowly unzipped the main compartment. No explosion, no chemical scent, just fabric. Layers and layers of folded clothing, neatly arranged in a way no 27-year-old man would normally pack unless forced to. Under the clothes was the first oddity, a thin, rigid lining sewn beneath the interior. Ethan tapped it. Hollow, too light to hide explosives, too stiff to be harmless. Lucas's breath hitched. "Please don't open it," he said quickly. "It's nothing illegal. It's just personal." Ethan raised a brow. Personal things don't usually require modified compartments. Lucas didn't answer. His hands trembled slightly, fingers curling into the hem of his jacket as though he needed something to anchor him to the world. Ethan gently peeled the lining back, but found only another layer of fabric. No drugs, no weapons, no electronics. Yet Shadow stiffened again, nose brushing close but stopping short, his hackles rising subtly, not in fear but in the strange, conflicted tension of a dog sensing something unnatural. Ethan's instincts prickled. Something was off, something not in the bag, but around them. He lifted his gaze and scanned the platform. People moved in a chaotic river of winter coats and rushing footsteps. But one figure stood out, a man leaning against a rusted column near the ticket machines. Mid-40s, burly with a thick neck and broad shoulders. His skin was weathered, deeply tanned like someone who spent years outdoors, and he wore a navy work jacket with no company patch. His dark beard was trimmed sharply along his square jaw. His posture was too rigid. His eyes, small, deep-set, and predatory, never left Lucas. Ethan's pulse tightened. "Lucas," he said quietly, nodding toward the stranger. "You know him?" Lucas's reaction was instant and involuntary. His eyes widened, his chin trembled, his knees nearly buckled. Shadow barked once, low but fierce, recognizing danger with the clarity of instinct. Lucas swallowed hard. He followed me," he stammered. "He's one of them." Ethan didn't need more explanation. The stranger fit the mold. Posture of a handler, eyes of a predator, silence of someone used to watching others from the shadows. A professional. Or worse. Lucas backed toward the bench, trembling. "If he sees the bag open, he'll think I told you. He'll think I failed." Ethan rose slowly, putting himself between Lucas and the watcher. He slid his foot back to nudge the bag behind him. Shadow bristled, gaze locked on the stranger. In that moment, the man shifted weight from one foot to the other, subtle, almost casual, but Ethan recognized the movement, the way someone prepares to move forward, or to strike. The stranger pushed off the column. Ethan stepped forward, blocking his view of Lucas entirely. He raised a hand, palm out, a calm but firm signal. "Station's busy today," Ethan said evenly, voice carrying without being loud. "Move along." The man didn't speak. His lips pressed into a thin line beneath the coarse beard. His dark eyes flicked to Shadow, then to the bag, then to Lucas. A slow, calculating recognition spread across his face. He took a single step closer. Shadow growled, teeth glinting. Nearby passengers edged away, sensing tension simmering beneath the surface. Finally, the stranger's gaze slid back to Ethan. He smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was thin and hollow, like a blade hidden beneath cloth. Then he turned and melted into the crowd, his heavy boots dragging faint echoes that merged with the platform noise until he vanished. Lucas collapsed onto the bench, burying his face in his hands. Ethan sat beside him. Shadow leaned gently against the young man's leg. "Tell me what they want you to carry," Ethan said softly, "because whatever it is, it's not in the bag." "Not yet." Lucas wiped his eyes. "I was supposed to meet someone on the train," he whispered shakily. "They said they'd load the real package into the lining after I boarded. I just had to deliver it. They promised money for my mom's surgery." Ethan let out a slow breath, the truth forming like storm clouds behind his ribs. "And the man watching you? He makes sure I don't run," Lucas whispered. "He calls me every hour. He knows where my mom lives." Shadow nudged Lucas's hand, urging him to breathe. Ethan reached for the backpack again, feeling its weight anew, not heavy from contraband, but heavy from the invisible chains wrapped around Lucas's life. "We're not boarding any train," Ethan said firmly. "You're not doing this alone." Lucas looked up, hope flickering weakly behind fear. "But they'll come after me." "Let them try," Ethan answered, voice flint-like. "You've got me, and you've got Shadow." Shadow barked softly in agreement. Ethan zipped the backpack closed, not as evidence, but as a promise that its secrets would come to light on his terms, not the criminals. A distant train screeched into the platform, brakes screaming like metal dragged across stone. The cold wind gusted through the station, rattling signs and sending a ripple of tension through the crowd. Ethan stood and offered Lucas a steadying hand. "This isn't the end," he said. "It's just where the story starts to turn." Shadow moved ahead, ears alert, ready for whatever shadows would emerge next. And deep within himself, Ethan, who had once sworn he was done chasing ghosts, felt the old fire wake again. Night rain swept across the Riverside district, turning the narrow service roads into shimmering black ribbons beneath the dim glow of aging street lamps. Ethan Ward moved with deliberate caution, his breath steady despite the chill that seeped through his jacket. At his side, Shadow trotted silently, the dog's powerful frame darkened by rain, his black and tan fur slicked tight against his muscles. The air was heavy with the smell of wet concrete and river silt, a scent so strangely familiar it tugged at something deep and unwelcome in Ethan's memory. 20 years earlier, this same district had been the setting of one of his most brutal cases, one that had carved a jagged scar across his conscience. Coming back felt like reopening a wound that had never fully closed. Ahead of them, Lucas staggered through the puddles. He wore a hooded gray jacket far too thin for the weather, and the rain plastered his dark hair across his forehead. His normally pale face looked almost ghost-like under the harsh industrial lighting. His wiry frame trembled, not just from the cold, but from the terror of what awaited him. Lucas kept glancing over his shoulder, as though expecting shadows themselves to reach out and drag him away. Each time he looked back, Shadow's calm, golden eyes met his, grounding him just enough to keep moving. They followed Lucas until the path opened into a desolate yard of gravel and broken fencing. Looming ahead was the warehouse that had once been a distribution center, now abandoned and scarred with rust. The building was a rectangular steel carcass, tall and imposing, its corrugated metal sides dented and stained by decades of storms. Only a few windows remained unbroken, glowing faintly from within. Ethan crouched behind a stack of shipping pallets, raising a hand for Lucas to stop. Rain drummed against his hood as he scanned the scene with the meticulous precision of a man who had spent more than half his life walking into danger. Inside the warehouse, silhouettes moved. 5 men. Their figures were angular and restless, pacing between crates stacked shoulder high. The faint light cast sharp shadows over their faces whenever they passed beneath hanging lamps. One of the men, clearly in charge, stepped into view. He was tall, broad, and dressed in a black utility coat. His appearance was sharp and severe. Short-cropped dark blonde hair, a long face with hollow cheeks, a nose slightly skewed from an old break, and cold, slate-gray eyes that seemed carved from stone. His name was Victor Hale. Ethan recognized him instantly. Victor had once been a paramedic before getting entangled in trafficking networks, his calm bedside manner twisting into a talent for manipulation. The betrayal of his profession had warped something inside him. It showed in the stiff way he carried himself, the methodical movements of a man who believed control was his birthright. Ethan felt heat rise beneath his ribs. 20 years ago, Victor had slipped through his fingers despite being tied to a case that cost Ethan a teammate. Seeing him again brought a bitter pulse of anger. Lucas whispered shakily, "That's him, the one who gives orders." Ethan nodded, jaw clenched. Shadow lowered his head, tail straight and motionless. One of Victor's men appeared beside him, a shorter, leaner guy with a shaved head and nervous energy. His thin lips twitched as he fidgeted with a pocket knife. His name, Ethan recalled from old files, was Travis Lorne, a former warehouse laborer with a slick temper and a reputation for panicking under pressure. His eyes darted constantly, scanning the space as if haunted. Victor barked orders in a low, controlled voice. "Check the containers. Make sure everything is sealed before the transport arrives. No mistakes tonight." Two other men, simple muscle, broad-shouldered and heavy-jawed, hauled crates toward a loading area. Their thick work jackets were soaked with rain, and the younger one carried a limp in his right leg, suggesting an injury he hadn't allowed time to heal. Neither of them spoke much. Their eyes were vacant, obedient. Ethan whispered, "They're preparing for shipment." Lucas wrapped his arms around himself. "They want me to carry one of the packages to prove I'm loyal. After that, they said they would let me live." His voice cracked at the edges. Shadow growled quietly, a rolling thunder deep in his chest. The dog's fur bristled along his spine, his senses tuning sharply to every movement inside the warehouse. Ethan placed a hand gently but firmly on Shadow's shoulder. "Easy," he murmured. "Not yet." Ethan needed clarity. He moved closer, inching along the side of the building until he could look through a cracked pane of glass. Inside, Victor examined a metal briefcase placed on an old work table. When he opened it, bright vials glinted under the lamp, glowing faintly blue. Chemicals, not the street kind, but industrial compounds used to create something far more lethal. Ethan recognized the labels. "They're smuggling volatile synthetic agents," he whispered to Lucas. "If even one container leaks..." Lucas swallowed hard. "That's what they threatened. They said the vials were stable, but they lie about everything." Shadow's low rumble intensified, and he pressed closer to the warehouse wall. Ethan noticed the dog's nose twitching sharply toward the seam along the loading door. Something inside was drawing Shadow's attention, something far more alarming than crates or vials. Ethan leaned in, watching him. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. Shadow shifted his stance, ears pricked. His eyes burned with a focused intensity that Ethan knew too well. The dog's entire body tightened, muscles coiled, as though he sensed danger poised on a razor's edge. Ethan's stomach tightened. "Something else is in there," he muttered. "Something worse." Before he could consider a plan of approach, a sudden movement inside the warehouse made Lucas gasp. Two of Victor's men grabbed someone from behind a stack of crates, a captive. The figure stumbled forward, wrists bound. Even through the rain-blurred window, Ethan recognized her. A woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked brown hair pulled back into a rough knot, wearing a worn hospital uniform jacket. Her face was gaunt, her eyes sunken from exhaustion, but there was unmistakable determination in them. Her name was Mary Dalton, Lucas's mother. Lucas inhaled sharply, knees buckling. No, they said she was in the clinic. They said she was safe." Ethan pulled him back before he rushed forward. "Lucas, stop! If you go in now, they'll kill you both." Lucas trembled violently, tears mixing with rain. "They took her to force me. They said she needed surgery, that they would help." His voice dissolved into a broken sob. Inside, Victor stepped toward Mary, his expression void of empathy. He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Your son still has a job to complete," he said. "If he fails, you both disappear. But if he succeeds, you go home." Mary spat at his feet, a small act of defiance, but powerful. Victor wiped his boot against the floor with irritation. "I admire spirit," he muttered coldly, "but it won't save you." Shadow growled so fiercely, Ethan feared the dog might lunge through the glass. He tightened his grip on the leash. "Shadow," he warned softly, "hold. Lucas wiped his face, grief sharpening into a raw edge of anger. "We have to save her." "We will," Ethan said, voice firm as steel. He surveyed the warehouse layout, the positions of guards, the timing of their patrols, the blind spots between crates. He cataloged every advantage and every threat with the instinct of a man forged in tactical combat. Lightning flashed across the river, illuminating the warehouse interior like a snapshot frozen in time. Victor ordering the vials packed, Travis pacing nervously, Mary standing tall despite her restraints, and the looming crates, metal containers Ethan recognized from past smuggling cases, containers that could withstand impact but not pressure. They were planning a transport tonight, and if the chemicals inside were unstable, the entire district could suffer. Shadow suddenly lowered into a crouch, tail rigid. His nostrils flared as though he sensed the chemicals. Danger without scent. Ethan knew the signal. The dog was preparing for an imminent breach. Ethan exhaled slowly. This ends tonight. But before he could take the first step, the warehouse lights flickered. A loud metallic clang echoed from deeper inside, a signal, a warning, a shift in whatever plans Victor had made. Shadow's growl sharpened into something primal. Ethan knew that sound. Something was about to go terribly wrong. Rain hammered the corrugated metal roof of the warehouse like a relentless drum, a pounding rhythm that merged with Ethan Ward's heartbeat as he crouched behind a stack of rusted steel barrels. The thin glow of a flickering floodlight outside cast long streaks of gold through the narrow window panels, painting the interior in fractured shadows. Everything smelled of wet iron, chemical fumes, and danger sharpened to a blade's edge. Ethan steadied his breath. He was 58, bones stiff from old battles, mind too weathered to fear death, but sharp enough to calculate the odds with brutal honesty. Odds he was about to ignore. "No backup," he whispered to Shadow, who crouched beside him, muscles coiled tight. "Just you and me, partner." Shadow, the 4-year-old German shepherd with a warrior's build and a wildfire's heart, didn't need orders. His golden eyes glowed with fierce clarity, his breath fogging softly in the cold. He lived for moments like this, not for bloodshed, but for purpose, for saving those who couldn't save themselves. Inside the warehouse, Lucas was bound to a support beam, wrists tied behind him, ankles strapped to a metal ring in the floor. His thin frame shook as he fought to stay conscious. Rainwater dripped through holes in the roof, sprinkling him in a cold mist that made his trembling worse. His face, young and strained, was bruised along the cheekbone, a testament to the guard's impatience. His mother, Mary Dalton, sat nearby, wrists tied but still upright, defiant even in exhaustion. Her pale, hollowed face was streaked with grime, yet her eyes burned with the fierce love of a mother who had endured too much to break now. "Lucas," she whispered hoarsely, leaning toward her son as far as the rope allowed. "Stay awake, sweetheart. Stay awake." 2 guards stood nearby. One was the burly enforcer with the limp, a man in his early 30s with a shaved jawline and a buzz cut of wet dark hair. His brow was heavy, giving him an almost caveman look, but the way his fingers tapped constantly against his thigh betrayed deeper nerves. The other was older, mid-40s, with a wiry build and a scar slicing diagonally across his left eyebrow. His thin, colorless lips curled with habitual disdain. His eyes shifted constantly, jittery as if his conscience had long abandoned him. Their job was simple. Make sure Lucas didn't run. Make sure Mary didn't scream. Make sure no one left alive unless Victor Hale commanded it. Victor himself was in the center of the warehouse, overseeing the loading of volatile chemical vials into shock-resistant containers. His severe face was carved from angles, sharp cheekbones, a rigid jaw, gray eyes like polished metal. He moved with cold precision, unbothered by the rain blowing through the broken panels. A lifetime ago, he had been a paramedic who brought calm into chaos. Now, he was the architect of chaos itself. Travis Lorne, the anxious underling with the shaved head, hovered beside him, fumbling with a clipboard. "Vials 11 through 15 sealed," Travis muttered, voice trembling. "Transport in 15 minutes. Victor didn't look up. "If the shipment isn't perfect, you won't live to see another 15 minutes. Travis shrank like a child scolded by a cruel parent. Ethan exhaled, rose slightly from his crouch, and touched Shadow's flank. On my mark. The dog's muscles hardened like coiled steel. The golden light outside flickered again, briefly illuminating Ethan's profile. The storm blue eyes, the lined face, the trimmed salt and pepper beard wet with rain. He looked older than he felt, but stronger than he appeared. He moved like a man who had already made peace with every consequence. The mark came in silence. Shadow launched first. He burst through the side door with a suddenness that shattered the warehouse's rhythm. Water flew off his coat in violent arcs as he lunged straight at the scar-eyed guard. The man's eyes widened, mouth opening in a startled shout that never fully formed. Shadow slammed into him, jaws clamping on his forearm with controlled precision. Enough pain to drop him, not enough to kill. The man fell backward, shrieking, his knife skittering across the concrete. Ethan followed half a second later, rolling through the doorway and rising in a fluid motion that belied his age. He struck the limping enforcer with the heel of his palm, catching him beneath the chin. The man staggered, but he was thick, built like a brick wall. He swung at Ethan with a meaty fist, grazing Ethan's cheek. Ethan countered, elbow driving into the man's throat. The enforcer collapsed, gasping for air. Victor Hale spun, eyes narrowing into slits. "Ward," his voice held both recognition and hatred. "Of course it's you." Ethan didn't answer. His world narrowed to movement and threat. He moved toward Lucas, but another guard charged from the shadows, a younger man with a chiseled jaw and stringy, water-slick brown hair. He carried a crowbar and swung it like he intended to crush skulls. Ethan blocked the first blow, but the second clipped his shoulder, sending a jolt of pain down his arm. He stumbled, just long enough for Victor to seize an advantage. "Hit him again!" Victor roared. The guard swung. Ethan dove aside, but too slow. The crowbar slammed into his ribs. Air left his lungs in a brutal gasp. He dropped to one knee, fighting the gray ringing clouding his vision. Rage flared inside Lucas. "Stop! Leave him alone!" His voice cracked, but it was enough. Shadow turned, eyes blazing, and launched at the guard. The man screamed as the crowbar clattered away. Shadow's teeth sank into his sleeve, wrenching him backward. Mary Dalton cried out, "Lucas! Ethan! Please!" Victor pulled a pistol from his coat. "Enough!" he hissed. Ethan forced himself upright. He'd been shot at more times than he remembered. A lone gun wouldn't stop him now. His voice emerged rough, edged with pain. "It ends tonight, Hale." "Agreed," Victor spat, leveling the gun. But lightning cracked outside, thunder exploding a heartbeat later, and the warehouse lights flickered. At that split second, Shadow attacked again, barreling into Victor's legs. The gun discharged, bullets sparking off a crate as Victor crashed to the floor. Travis screamed and hid behind a pallet. Lucas struggled against his restraints, panic twisting his features. "Mom, hang on, please, hang on!" Shadow pivoted, tore at the ropes binding Lucas's wrists. The thick fibers resisted, but not for long. Ethan joined him, pulling the knots free. Just as Lucas was released, a metal container toppled from a nearby stack, knocked loose in the chaos. It slammed onto the ground, cracking open. A vial rolled out, glowing faintly blue. Ethan's eyes widened. "Don't touch it!" The vial hissed softly, heat radiating from the crack. Mary shrieked as it rolled toward her. Shadow lunged again, teeth gripping Lucas's binding rope still tied to his ankle. He dragged Lucas with surprising strength, pulling him away from the vial a split second before it burst with a sharp snap, sending a plume of chemical vapor into the air. The vapor clung to the floor like luminescent fog. Victor scrambled backward. "Idiot fools! This entire place could go up!" Ethan shoved Mary behind a stack of crates. "Stay down!" Shadow stood between Ethan and Lucas, growling deep enough to rattle the metal beams. The limping enforcer tried to rise. Ethan struck him again, putting him down for good. The scar-eyed guard crawled toward the exit but collapsed from pain and shock. Travis, panicked, shaking, raised his hands. "I don't want to die! I didn't sign up for this! I don't want to die!" Victor grabbed him by the collar. "Then stand up and—" Shadow growled, stepping forward. Victor froze. Even a man without fear recognized true danger. Ethan advanced, battered but unbroken. His voice came low. "It's over, Hale." Victor glared, rainwater streaming down his face through the hole in the roof. "You should have stayed retired." "Funny," Ethan murmured. "I was thinking the same about you." The final struggle was brief. Victor lunged. Ethan struck. Shadow circled and lunged as backup. Together, man and dog overwhelmed the man who had cast so much darkness. Victor Hale hit the ground with a choked breath and did not rise again. And then, silence. Only rain dripping through broken metal. Only the low hum of the golden floodlight outside. Lucas fell to his knees, tears streaming freely. Mary sank beside him, embracing him despite her bruised wrists. Shadow padded to Ethan's side, fur muddy, chest rising in deep breaths, eyes burning bright and unwavering, like a flame that refused to die. Ethan knelt and placed a trembling hand on Shadow's neck. "Good work, partner," he whispered. The rain washed the blood and dirt away, leaving only the golden glow that marked the end of the longest night. Morning sunlight spilled through the long windows of St. Haven Medical Center, washing the hallway floors in a pale amber glow that softened the edges of the night's violence. The storm had passed hours ago, leaving the world outside rinsed clean, and the rising sun shimmered across the glass like a quiet benediction. Ethan Ward walked slowly beside Shadow, the German shepherd's paws clicking rhythmically on the polished tiles. Ethan's ribs ached from the blows he had taken during the warehouse fight, and bruises were beginning to darken beneath his shirt, but there was a looseness in his breath, relief perhaps, or the rare feeling of something close to peace. They made their way toward room 214. Lucas had been taken in for observation, but his injuries were mostly superficial: cuts, bruises, dehydration. What weighed heavily on him was exhaustion and the crushing release from the fear he had lived under for months. Mary Dalton, his mother, was recovering just 2 rooms away. The hospital, though quiet, held a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold steel walls of the warehouse where all of this could have ended differently. Too differently. Inside the room, Lucas sat beside his mother's bed. He had showered, his dark hair now brushed away from his face, revealing features younger than his grief had allowed. He wore a loose hospital sweater, its sleeves slightly too long, giving him a vulnerable, boyish look. His gray eyes, once consumed by panic, now glimmered with a fragile hope. Mary Dalton reclined against her pillows, the soft beeping of a heart monitor steady behind her. Her silver-streaked brown hair had been gently combed by a nurse, and her gaunt face, though tired, carried a glow of safety for the first time in many months. Her skin, pale under the hospital lights, had regained some color, and her lips curved in a faint smile as Ethan stepped inside. "Mr. Ward," she whispered, her voice soft and trembling. "You came." Ethan removed his cap and nodded politely. His storm-blue eyes softened, a rare, unshielded gentleness, the kind he hadn't shown often since his SWAT days. "Just Ethan is fine," he said quietly, "and I had help." He gestured downwards. Shadow padded forward with the grace of a seasoned guardian. Though still damp from the rain and battle, his coat caught the morning light like burnished metal. He approached Mary's bedside and lifted his head gently onto the blanket. Mary reached out with a trembling hand and rested it on Shadow's neck. A tear slipped down her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, voice cracking with emotion. "Both of you. You saved my son." Lucas looked away for a moment, swallowing hard. He had cried enough during the past hours to empty an ocean, yet the well of emotion had not run dry. A soft knock sounded against the open door, and a woman stepped inside. A hospital social worker named Anna Whitfield. She was in her early 40s, tall and slender, with warm brown skin and tightly curled black hair gathered into a low bun. Her oval face carried kind eyes behind rectangular glasses, and she moved with the quiet, practiced grace of someone who had spent years calming panicked families and offering comfort without judgment. "Morning," Anna said with a smile. "Sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to give everyone an update." She held a folder against her chest, its edges worn from long nights of work. "Lucas," she said gently, turning to him, "the police department confirmed your cooperation. The DA's office will not press charges. You've been granted full immunity." Lucas blinked as though he hadn't heard correctly. "So, I won't go to prison?" "No," Anna replied firmly. "You were coerced, and you saved lives by coming forward." Lucas let out a shuddering breath, shoulders sagging with overwhelming relief. Mary pressed her hand to her heart, eyes brimming. "Thank God," she murmured. "Thank God." Anna continued. And thanks to Mr. Ward, Shadow, and the evidence obtained, the trafficking network is dismantled. Victor Hale is in custody, his men too. None of them will ever threaten you or your mother again. Shadow lifted his head, tail giving a small, measured wag, as if acknowledging the victory not with pride, but with the quiet certainty of a protector who understood the weight of what had been done. Anna offered Ethan a grateful nod. You brought closure to a lot of families last night. Ethan shook his head lightly. Just did what needed doing. But Mary disagreed. She reached out, her frail yet determined fingers curling around Ethan's hand. No, she whispered, voice trembling. You did more. You showed my son the goodness I always prayed the world still had. You didn't just save him. You saved me from losing him. Ethan felt her gratitude like a warmth rising beneath his ribs. It had been a long time since anyone had thanked him with that much sincerity. Too long. Mary stroked Shadow's ears again, and the dog closed his eyes in quiet contentment. The room fell into a soft, healing silence, the kind that wraps around wounded hearts like a balm. After a while, Ethan stepped back. I'll let you both rest. Lucas stood quickly. Mr. Ward, Ethan, thank you. His voice was steadier now. I don't know how to repay you. Ethan studied the young man, seeing not a victim anymore, but the first spark of resilience. Take care of your mother, Ethan said simply. Live your life, that's enough. Shadow followed Ethan out into the hallway. The morning sun poured through the tall windows, bathing the corridor in warm gold. Dust motes drifted lazily in the air. Nurses passed by with calm purpose, their soft shoes whispering along the floor. Ethan paused halfway down the hall and looked at Shadow. The dog sat upright, ears tilted forward, tail swaying slowly. Light shimmered. Across his fur, rich bronze where the sun hit, deep black where shadows pooled. Ethan knelt beside him, one hand resting on the dog's strong shoulders. You didn't just save them, you know, he murmured. All night long, you saved parts of me I thought were gone, the parts I buried, the parts I stopped believing mattered. Shadow tilted his head slightly and Ethan chuckled, a quiet, worn-out sound. Yeah, he murmured. I guess you know that already. Shadow gave a soft bark, not loud, not urgent, but gentle, affirming, a sound of loyalty rather than alarm. Ethan stood again, hand brushing over the dog's damp coat. Outside the window the sun climbed higher, turning the river into a sheet of glimmering silver. The world felt hopeful again, not perfect, not fixed, but hopeful, and that was enough. Ethan walked toward the elevator, Shadow pacing beside him, their footsteps echoing down the bright hallway. The night was over. The story, though scarred, had found its dawn. And the journey between man and dog would continue, bound not by command or duty, but by something far deeper. A promise, unspoken, yet unbreakable. In the quiet glow of a new dawn, one truth rose above the chaos of the night. Heroes aren't defined by uniforms or medals, but by the courage to act when others can't, and by the loyalty that asks for nothing in return. Shadow reminded us that bravery doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks beside us on four steady paws, guiding us back to the parts of ourselves we thought were lost. And Ethan showed that even a heart shaped by scars can still protect, still choose compassion, and still rise again when the world needs it most. Together, they proved that hope often arrives in unlikely forms, through second chances, rescued lives, and the small miracles found in loyalty and love. In our daily routines, rushing to work, worrying about bills, juggling responsibilities, it's easy to forget the quiet strengths around us. The people who choose kindness even when life has been unkind to them. The loyal companions, human or animal, who stand by us without hesitation. The moments when we want to give up but someone or something nudges us forward. This story reminds us to look closer, to trust our instincts, to help one another, to believe that even when life grows dark, we are never walking alone. And sometimes, the courage to keep going is the greatest act of heroism of all. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or reminded you of the quiet heroes in your own life, we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. What part moved you the most? Tell us about a loyal companion who once changed your life. Like the video to help these stories reach more people who need hope. Subscribe to the channel and join us for new heartfelt stories every day. Your support helps keep these stories alive and reminds the world that courage, loyalty, and love still matter.